Oh, hey, fellow artists, it's Roz here, and today we're diving into a juicy conversation about visibility, courage, and getting your work out into the world with someone who knows this stuff inside out. If you've ever felt that wobble in your chest when you go to share your art, launch something new, or simply hit post, this episode is going to feel like a warm exhale. We are talking about the inner work behind the scenes, what actually fuels creative confidence, and why your visibility matters more than you think. This is episode 106 of the Paint, Rest, Repeat podcast, which means that you can find all the relevant links and the show notes over at permissiontopaint.co/podcast 106. Welcome to Paint, Rest, Repeat, the podcast for artists who are ready to ditch the overwhelm, follow their passion, and build a thriving art life on their own terms. I'm Roz, an Aussie artist, mum of two, and creative business coach who knows exactly how wild, wonderful, and wobbly the artist journey can be, because I've lived it. I left behind a safe teaching career to follow my heart into art, and now my work hangs in galleries and major art fairs across Australia. After years of coaching, I'm passionate about helping you ditch the starving artist myth, stick it to the naysayers, and design a creative life that truly lights you up. So if you're ready for real talk, practical tips, and heartfelt encouragement, you found your podcast. Hit follow and let's dive in. Today, we've got a really special guest joining us, Anna Holtzman. Anna is a therapist turned coach who helps sensitive creatives and entrepreneurs move through the fear of visibility and finally launch the work that feels most true to them. After 15 years in TV and publishing and a handful of false starts on her own creative dreams, burnout and chronic pain led her to the nervous system tools that helped her unblock her voice and show up for the work that she loves. Now she helps others to do the same. Melt through imposter syndrome, bring their creative visions to life, and share them boldly. She lives in Queens, New York, with her husband, stepdaughter, and 3 orange cats, and she also hosts the podcast, How to Trust Yourself. We just got off the back of recording me chatting on your podcast, so yes. We've done a little...
So we're best friends now, basically, after chatting for an hour.
I'm really loving this connection. So, and I would have just done, your proper intro on the podcast. So our listeners, hello listeners, will know a little bit about you already, but they might not know how we connected. So we connected just basically through Instagram. Did I message you randomly? Is that what happened?
Yes, you did. And I was like, I like you. I don't know how you found me, but
and the funny thing is, I actually can't remember initially how I found you either. I might have seen you somewhere, how, online.
It's like, I know, the algorithmic rabbit hole that, does some not so helpful things, but it also brings you into contact with people that you would never have otherwise met.
100%. So thank you for being here today and for joining us on the podcast.
Thank you so much for having me.
Such a pleasure. All right, lovelies. Should we start by sharing a little bit more, maybe about, I've already shared a little bit about who you are, who you help and all of that jazz, but maybe you want to put it into your own words and introduce yourself to everyone.
Hi, everyone. It's so nice to meet you. I'm thrilled to be here. And I feel like just launching right into the journey of how I got to doing what I do. So what I do now is I coach sensitive leaders, creatives, entrepreneurs, and help them to move through the fear of visibility. This is sort of a culmination of a very long and winding professional road. I refer to myself sometimes as the queen of pivots because I've just pivoted many times. So I started off my professional life very briefly in the field of architecture, which we've got some crossover there. And I quite quickly pivoted into the world of publishing. So I worked at an architecture and design magazine, and I was writing for other design magazines. And then from there, pivoted into film and television and ended up as a video editor on reality TV shows for 10 years. So that was a very substantial chunk of my professional life. And then I turned a hard left and got into coaching and then went back to grad school to become a therapist. But for the first 15 or so years of my career, I was essentially a creative for hire in a variety of different capacities over time. But I never wanted to be that creative for hire. That was always supposed to be an entry point. And what I really wanted to be doing is be like a creative front and center. I wanted to have my own work out there, the very thing that you support people with, right? And so I had many very promising false starts in that direction. And I'll tell just one of those stories because it really tells the story of how I got into what I'm doing now. When I was planning my pivot from publishing into film and television, and what I really wanted to be was an independent film director. And so I made a film, this very scrappy documentary about New York City subway musicians. I've always lived in New York. It's a very accessible subject. And I made the film, and I was still working at a magazine at the time. And so I had access to all of these press contacts because people were always sending me press releases, and I was hoarding their email addresses. And I put up my own screening of this film in a funky little theater in downtown. And I knew how to write a press release for myself because I was always receiving press releases. I knew the ones that I would read and the ones that I wouldn't read. And so I wrote up this press blast, sent it out to everyone, and I got all of this incredible visibility through that. I mean, first of all, I started off with a lot of chutzpah. I started off with this big burst of like confidence, I guess, to put myself out there, and got all this visibility off that press release. So I got a full page write-up in a magazine called Time Out New York, which was a big deal in New York back at that time. This was in the aughts. And through that was asked to be on a live local TV show. And the crown jewel on all of this experience was I got a call from the producers of David Lee Roth of Van Halen, had a live radio show at the time. And his producers called me, and I thought it was a crank call, but it was real. And so they had me on the radio show, and David Lee Roth interviewed me. It was just totally wild. And, it's like, wow, I'm doing the thing. I'm putting myself out there, and it's working. It feels like it's working. After the screening of the film was over, I Googled my name and the name of the film. And along with all of this cool press stuff that came up, there was this one blog post on some very obscure personal blog, a woman who'd come to see the film, probably a frustrated filmmaker herself, who knows, but she wrote a very scathing review, not only of the film, but of me and my character. I mean, it was just a total teardown of the film and me and just everything about me. And it was so upsetting, even though I'm sure very, very few other people saw this, but I saw it. It was so upsetting, and it crushed me. And the way I remember that period of time is that 2 months later, I woke up from a fog, looked in the rearview mirror, and said to myself, "Oh, I guess my film never really got picked up. I guess I'm not going to be a film director. I guess that film didn't launch my career, and it just didn't really work out for me." And what I didn't see at the time is that I had dropped the project. I stopped promoting it. I stopped showing up for my creative work, for myself. I just went into a rabbit hole to hide because in hindsight, my nervous system got understandably triggered by this experience, and it went into a freeze response. But I didn't have that language or that understanding at the time. And so I just lived through that cycle over and over and over again in my creative work. And I didn't develop that awareness or language until I was this took place in my 20s. So it wasn't until I was in my 40s that I was pivoting careers yet again. I decided I wanted to become a therapist. I was in grad school. And during that time, I had been getting migraine headaches throughout my TV career, but they really spun out of control during grad school. They became chronic, and it had to become a focus for me to figure out, like, how do I need to do something about this? So I discovered this whole world of mind-body medicine, learning about the nervous system, learning how our nervous system responds to stress and threat, whether it's real threat or perceived threat. And I was able to recover from the chronic migraines through this work. So that became the focus of my therapy and coaching work for the first 5 years of doing that. And as I was doing this work, I was building a business as a therapist and coach, yet again, having to put myself out there. And this time around, having that language, I was able to recognize, oh, when I go to speak on a podcast, for example, or publish a blog post, or just even at dinner, tell somebody my new professional identity that I'm still stepping into, I'm feeling that my nervous system is getting triggered. I'm feeling a spike of anxiety. I'm feeling my palms are sweating. I'm feeling my breath is getting shallow. But now, instead of going into a complete spiral and then hiding in a rabbit hole for the next 2 months and losing all the progress I've made, at that stage, I had the tools to guide myself through it. And I realized I could use the same tools that I used to heal from migraine to coach myself through the fear of visibility so I could keep showing up for my work, my business, my creative work. And that became the work that I help other people with. So that's what I do and what brought me here.
That is an amazing story. And it's interesting to think of all these experiences that you've had and where they come from, where they sent to you so that you would find this calling and you'd be equipped to help other people with their challenges as well. Thank you for sharing around these experiences and your pathway to what you're doing today. I'm taking notes. I take notes while I'm interviewing so that
I do the same thing. And I do the same thing because otherwise I can't remember anything.
Yes, 100%. And the thought's gone and then my good questions disappeared. I was just thinking about what you're sharing and the value of knowledge. So having this knowledge around what the nervous system is and how fear can present itself in your body, and then the history as well of where that fear originated for you and how that all started. So by having that knowledge, then you've been able to have the awareness of what's happening in your body. And then on top of that, you have now the tools and the toolkit for managing that situation as well as preventing it, I'm sure. So it's amazing, isn't it? But it takes an experience, I suppose, like you're expressing or sharing with us to push you into this space of seeking this knowledge. And now you're here helping other people. And I think I'm just having a little monologue for a moment. I think having you on today, number one, we have a great connection. But also, I just knew that what you do is just incredibly relevant to my listeners and this world of art, because often we are introverted and shy and we're the type that are a bit more quiet or more reserved. And we have to learn how to be more visible, how to be more courageous, how to be seen for who we truly are and who we want to be as well.
Yeah. And it's interesting. It seems to me that there is a lot of crossover between the personality type that becomes an artist, the personality type that becomes a therapist, and the personality type that can develop stress-related chronic pain, actually.
Mm-hmm.
And the way that I see this is like those of us who happen to have a particular heightened sensitivity in our nervous system, that heightened sensitivity can be highly sensitive to our creative energy, to aesthetics, to beauty. It can be highly sensitive to empathy, to tuning in to other people. And it can also be highly sensitive to overwhelm. And for me, it did manifest in these migraine symptoms. And I've worked with folks who have similar experiences, different symptoms. we all as humans are wired to feel fear in some way of stepping out there and taking the risk of stepping out in front of people. And some of us feel our fear in a way that can be very physically or emotionally overwhelming and need some tools and support to help us move through it.
Yeah, definitely. So that was my next question. I think you've just answered it though. What is the fear of visibility and what does it feel like? So yeah, you're sharing that it can feel very different for different people.
It can. And this is something I really love to speak about, especially to sensitive creatives, because sometimes fear shows up in a way that is very easy to recognize. For example, like if you're an artist and you're about to go exhibit your work and maybe stand in front of people and talk about your work, let's say you wake up on the morning of that occasion and you wake up with, racing anxiety going through your mind, and it's telling you very clearly, like, oh my gosh, I have to stand in front of people. I'm freaking out. They're going to look at my work, blah, blah, blah. Like, that's a very obvious form of fear, and we can easily identify what it is. But fear can also show up in a whole host of much sneakier disguises that are harder to recognize. And because they're harder to recognize, it's like they get in the door and we don't know to stop them, and we believe them and let them take over and let them start running the show. So just a few examples of this could be like, one day you wake up with an idea for a creative project and you just know this is the thing that you've got to do next and you're all fired up and excited about it. Well, then the next day you wake up and you think, oh, what was I thinking? That's like actually not a very interesting idea at all. I just don't feel any enthusiasm for it whatsoever. That is one of the disguises that fear can wear. It's just like blah, disinterest, diminishment of enthusiasm. And really what fear is doing is it has good intentions. It's trying to protect you from something that it perceives as dangerous. So if your nervous system perceives visibility as dangerous, your nervous system cares a great deal about you, and it will try to protect you by creating barriers to you doing the quote unquote dangerous thing. So if it sends you these signals of disinterest and lack of enthusiasm, that's a great way for fear to get you to not step out in front of people and stay safe. Other forms are like imposter syndrome and thinking that you don't have any ideas when really you do. There's just all these kind of sneaky forms of it.
Why are we so complex, Anna? Why are we not simple? We didn't come with instructions, right? And I don't know who, but I need to write a strongly worded letter to someone to complain about this.
And how did prior generations manage to do all the amazing, absolutely amazing things that they've done without these frameworks that we seem to need in order to understand ourselves better?
That is an interesting question. Is that part of evolution? Are we changing? Are we changing?
We're going to have to do some research.
I'm just going to ask, do we ask Google or do we ask ChatGPT? These
definitely ChatGPT.
My goodness, what you're saying is just resonating with me so much. And I think our listeners will be feeling connected with what you're saying as well. I always ask my people, are you choosing to do this? Is this an act of love? Like, is this coming from love or is this coming from fear? Is this a towards move or is this an away move? And it relates to what you're saying as well, like to really investigating the reasons behind something you talk about or you verbalize. Or what's the foundation for this? Where does this come from?
I love that. And I use those metaphors quite a bit too. I really relate to that. And as I was hearing you say it, I was like, yeah, like would love say, oh, that idea you had yesterday isn't really that interesting? Or is that something fear would say? It's a good question to ask ourselves because it's not always like fear is a great lawyer. It's very convincing. And we have to find these ways of zooming out to assess who's actually speaking.
Yeah, really powerful. And I think it's possibly important as well to recognize that fear is part of us. It's not a bad part of us, but just being able to see that and check in that it's not holding us back. What's your take on that?
I'm so glad that you said that because even me, like I'm still human and I'm still pulled into all these things. And I can absolutely get sort of sucked into a mentality that fear is bad. And that's a very unhelpful path to go down because fear is part of us. We do need it. It's part of how we survive and move through the world. And once I get into a battle with my fear, I'm in a battle with a part of myself. And so it's a very tangled up place to be. It's helpful to remember that fear does have the best of intentions, just like children have the best of intentions. It doesn't always mean that the strategies that they are choosing are the ones that are going to be best for them or for the greater good. And so it's important to get clear on what are the intentions and then does the strategy match the outcome that we're going for.
Where does this generally come from, this fear of visibility, for your clients that you work with? What are the more common stories around the foundation of this fear?
Yeah, I'll share my personal theory. I think it's sort of a combination of two things. I do think there is something innate in our wiring that, like, our survival system tells us that it could be risky to stick our head out and be seen in a way that's more, we could be judged if we're being seen. And there's also personal experiences, ancestral experiences, just this whole card catalog of experiences that our nervous system draws upon to assess whether something is safe or dangerous. Like, for example, our nervous system knows that it's not safe to stick our hand in a flame. Why is that? Probably a combination of just like an innate knowing, but also maybe an experience you had when you were a kid and you did stick your hand in the flame and the nervous system is like, I'm going to file that away to use throughout the rest of your life. And so we have experiences like this tied to visibility as well. I think we all have numerous experiences that relate to this. There's one that tends to come to my mind from my own childhood. When I was in, I think, the second grade, I was a kid that loved to raise my hand. I was just that kid that, like, I loved to learn. I loved to know the answer. I loved to be called on. And I would kind of wiggle in my seat and wave my hand around and want to be called on. And I thought this was a great thing. I thought, I was going into it like heart open, like, yes, I'm being part of the world. And on this one occasion, my teacher, who I adored and looked up to, she must have been having a bad day because she looked at me and she said, Anna, nobody likes a know-it-all. And I was just crushed, like so ashamed. And she said it in front of all of my peers. Suddenly something that I thought was really good and wonderful was I'm being told it's bad. And so I felt like I'm bad and, went into shame feelings. And it's absolutely in there as a reference point for my nervous system. And I know that because the memory has like floated up at not so random moments in my adult life when I'm doing something like preparing to speak in front of other people. So yeah, our nervous system holds on to this data.
Yeah, I have heard you tell that story on one of your own podcast episodes because you have a podcast too. And yeah, that's a thing, isn't it? We do have these stories and experiences from our past. And when you were telling that story, I remembered an experience that I had, which I won't share necessarily now, but I didn't realize how often that actually came up for me. So again, It comes back to that awareness because often we just float through and things come and go from our minds, but that awareness can really help us move forward.
Yeah, and the awareness helps partly because these stories usually don't come up as stories in the moment. They more so come up as reflexes, like a recoil reflex, like a step back, don't speak, don't show yourself reflex. And we're not always going to, quote unquote, get to the bottom of it and find the story. It's not always that linear, but it can be helpful when we identify a story like that. And then we can sit with ourselves and say, hey, like, that was inappropriate the way the teacher spoke to you. That has nothing to do with your character or your heart. And I'm so sorry that happened. And you were just a wonderfully enthusiastic kid.
And then the next step, though, I'm sure, is how do you, I don't know if you use this sort of terminology, but how do you heal then from something like that? And I'm thinking of our listeners as well. I'm sure they can relate. They've had similar sorts of experiences that might be popping up now, even as we're chatting.
I might use the word like tend to, because I use the word to, but it can imply like get this out of our nervous system's card catalog. But I think one area of this is tending to our younger selves in those experiences. So kind of like looking at the story with the eyes of a caring adult and saying things like, oh gosh, that wasn't about you. That adult was having a bad day. There was something going on for them and they projected it onto you. Like, that does not belong to you. That is not about you. And giving that younger version of ourselves a hug, inner child work, I think can be really powerful. So that's one piece of it, is tending to those past versions of ourselves. Another big and really powerful piece is tending to our present time self and our present time emotions. And one of the tools that's really a big go-to for me is dialoguing with my present time fear. So earlier I was talking about how I can absolutely get caught up in this idea that, oh no, fear is coming. No, get rid of it. Like, make it disappear, just white knuckle through it or lock it in a closet. Like, I don't want that fear to get in the way of my doing this podcast and doing the things I want to do. But what I have found is that if I try to banish my fear or lock it in a closet, my fear will behave just the same way that maybe like a frightened puppy would behave if I yelled at it and was annoyed at it and locked it in the closet and tried to get rid of it. My fear will freak out if I treat it that way. And what it really needs is for me to pet it, to sit with it, to be curious with it, to be caring with it, to sit down with it and say, hey, like, oh, you're feeling fearful. Well, I'm right here. Do you want to talk? We can sit together. You can talk, not talk. I'd love to know what's going on. And then soothe and reassure it and let it know that it's not alone. It's not weird or broken. I know what fear feels like. It's a very human emotion. It's like I'm talking with my fear as if it were its own entity. And I really like to do that through journaling. I do this kind of style of journaling that I've come to that is a dialogue with my fear. And I'll ask it these 3 questions, which is, what other emotions are you feeling? What would you like me to know? And what are you trying to protect me from? And through engaging it in that dialogue, it starts to soften. It starts to trust me and it starts to feel safe with me.
That's beautiful. Instead of pushing it away, you're almost pulling it closer. And it does remind me a little bit of parenting styles, actually.
Totally. It's absolutely a form of self-parenting.
Yeah. And it's not like this part of you is bad, you need to go to your room. It's instead, come in for a cuddle and let's talk about this. Like, how are you feeling? What happened today? And really trying to investigate through that lens of kindness and love as well. Yeah.
Yes. Mm. And I'll just be honest, like, if I could shortcut that and just tell my fear to get lost, and if that worked for me, 100% I would be doing that. It doesn't work for me. I'm a very sensitively wired person, and it just doesn't work for me.
Yeah. And I think our listeners will relate to that as well. I think, yeah, we're all sensitive beings, the creatives. And like you're saying, that's probably where it comes from. We're sensitive, and that's why we notice beauty around us.
Yes. Yeah. I think that in order to access our creativity, we need to access a very open state. And that openness is also a vulnerability.
Yeah. In order to be creative, you actually need to feel safe, because creativity is a risk in itself.
Yes.
Let alone sharing the creativity with others. It's a risk. I know that for me, I'm just oversharing here as I do something. But if I'm in a bit of a tense period with my husband, I don't paint as much because I am not feeling safe, But when everything's nice and smooth sailing, I find I'm much more involved in my art practice. Now, when you interviewed me on your podcast, you had a very organized final questions. And I'm sitting here going, I have a final question that I tend to ask people, but I can't remember what it is. But I think my question, and I'm trying to sort of tweak it to relate to you as well, is if you could give some advice to yourself, say 10, 15 years ago, what would your advice be? What do you wish you knew, for example?
Oh gosh. I would say you are on the right path. And I would really have needed to hear it back then, because it was a real pivot point in so many different ways in my life. And it felt very disorienting at the time. I had worked in television for 10 years. I questioned, am I nuts to be letting this go, to step into the unknown that feels more aligned for me right now? But am I even going to be able to make money at this? Are people going to laugh at me? I was going through all that stuff. And, similarly, I was starting a new relationship, and I had this very strong feeling that this was it for me, but there's all kinds of questions that come up in the beginning. So I would just go back and say, it's supposed to feel this scary and uncomfortable, but the reason you're doing these things is because you know that you're on the right path, and you can trust that. You can trust yourself.
Oh, that's good. Actually, talking about trust yourself. The next question is, how can listeners get in touch with you and learn more about what you do? And one way, of course, is your podcast, which is called
How to Trust Yourself. And you should listen to it if for no other reason than to listen to Roz and I chatting on it.
This is true.
And a great way to get a taste of my world, the tools that I use, how I move through the fear of visibility, and how I help others to do that, is I have a free visibility workshop that you can take. It's lots of fun. I guide you by the hand. I take you through practices. I guide you through the journaling dialogue, and it's called Let Yourself Be Seen. And you can grab it at my website, annaholtzman.com/be seen. That's really the best way to dip a toe into my world. You can also come hang out with me on Instagram. I'm there at Anna_Holtzman. I answer my DMs very personally, so please reach out and tell me what's going on for you in the realm of visibility, what fears are coming up, what yearnings and longings are coming up. I'd love to chat.
Thank you so much, Anna, for joining us today. We'll see you around.
Yeah, I look forward to it. Thanks so much for having me.
Pleasure, lovely chatting. And that's a wrap on today's chat with the brilliant Anna Holtzman. I hope that you're leaving today's episode feeling a little more seen, a little more supported, and a whole lot less alone in those visibility wobbles we all know too well. And if something in this conversation stirred a thought like, I want to be braver with my work, or I'm ready to take myself seriously, hold on to that. That is not an accident. That is the part of you that is ready to grow. And when you are ready for deeper guidance, structure, and a community of artists who are taking courageous steps right alongside you, well, I've got a space for that too. Step in whenever it feels right. Until then, keep creating, keep showing up in the ways that feel true for you. I'm Roz Gervais, and I'll catch you in the next episode.